So culture is also omnipresent. It's important to unpack its consequence and implication. It has a different meaning when we are trying to talk about product and services. It has got different connotation when we are trying to understand how the communication pattern work, or how do we do business with foreign business partners, how do we negotiate arrangements, what does it mean when we are, say, trying to put multi-million pound sterling advertising campaign and stuff like that. So it has different meaning. We need to differentiate between this. Now, one of the most important concept when it comes to cultural discussion in the literature has been around cultural distance. Okay, and this relates to the extent to which different cultures are similar or different. I mean, this is a very large debate in international business. It's because these three questions you got in front of you here is cultural distance, black and white. I don't think it is. For example, is Chinese firm investing in the UK faced with the same cultural distance as the UK firm investing in China? Okay, so there is no evidence that it's true. It's not symmetrical, right? So is cultural distance a constant? We assume, it's definite. Cultural distance change over time, right? Will Chinese culture change with so many global brands penetrating its space? I don't think so. There is a lot of pressures for a global brand to actually conform to the given market. And we can't assume that all national contexts are uniform in their culture. There is many discussions about Africa, for example, but is it one Africa we talk about? Similarly, is it one China we talk about? We know that Chinese context is very, very different from one region to another, okay? So that difference matter between rural and urban and so on. So many examples of that. We will have a look a few later on as well. Xiang Yu's answering. Thank you, Xiang Yu. I'm just gonna continue then. Right. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this cultural framework. By now, all of you know the expert, and I am simply bringing it out to illustrate a few dimensions of this framework. Okay. So I have also posted out critique about this framework that sort of complement your reading about this. This framework exhibit the struggle from academic scholar to capture culture in a way that we can understand them, okay, and in a way that we can derive meaning when doing international business. By no means this is an easy exercise. So Hofstede framework by far is the most received and the most debated from that point of view, like his idea around power distance, around uncertainty avoidance, individualism, masculinity are some of the criteria which has some kind of fuel discussions and debate, and this has thrown lots of insights in this context. So we can see how power distances different for different countries, and what this means for questions around authority, for example. How would you go about structuring this market, and what it means for relationship between hierarchies of management, for example. Again, uncertainty avoidance is the extent of routine versus more flexible, right? And individualism is where a lot of emphasis on self-sufficiency on your own versus working on a group or depending on a group, and so on and so forth. Right. So there has been a lot of discussion about Hofstede's around, this week. These are some of the criticism about his framework. when we are trying to apply Hofstede's work, which are developed around a narrow database, is therefore it's been criticized on that angle. It focused on one organization first of all. It's on IBM. So it's been a question because it's not relevant and it's dated. But saying that, Hofstede also haven't been updated his view on his framework up until recently as well. So the representation of an issue in the making of that framework, and there is also cultural diversity that can exist within the organization that he didn't quite capture. Okay, so here I just want to point the important critics of Hofstede. Some has a view that Hofstede did not quite display what these assumptions really mean for organizational practice. Okay, and Hofstede has not demonstrated national culture as how we think within the management discipline. There is a rich characteristic of individual, organization, society, nations, regions. They need to be broken down in that way. Okay, so if we see his, this is what entrepreneurs try to do. And entrepreneurs try to emphasize the extent of work of Hofstede to identify different set of criteria, which is much more mind-blowing, of a cultural trait of different countries. Again, it's interesting enough. Hofstede also took a step at entrepreneurs' work back in 1996. He said, well, they are not really universal as well in that respect. He questioned the sample that he took, sort of categorize the different culture. It was raising questions from the instrument that he used to develop the variable as well. I think irrespective of whether you're looking at entrepreneurs or a Hofstede, you have to take the value and the meaning that they're trying to convey about these three key things here. First one is about around organization. Second one is about leadership, and third one is about communications. These three dimensions matters for any respect of cross-cultural management in the international business context, and that is what Collinson and Nerula and Ruckman emphasize in their book. So when we're looking at the organizational level, for example, we need to understand how business are going to organize itself in any given context, and what does it mean for structure, right? And what does it mean for relationship between employee and management in that context? Can all the cultural nuance be predicted and managed for the effective running and operational business? Now, the second thing is about leadership. What kind of leadership is appropriate for a given culture, and what kind of management behavior we can expect in this context? And then the third one is about communication. Therefore, what are the most effective way? Okay, the cultural nuance around communication. What is acceptable? What is not acceptable? What signify an agreement? What signify a disagreements? Okay, Collinson, Nerula, and Ruckman, they try to capture these three sets of questions in terms of organization. The summary here is we try to understand how we are going to effectively organize a business in a given culture context. How you operationalize processes. How would you go about planning? How would you go about information gathering? How would you go about measuring performance in a given cultural context? What's the metrics? Okay, what does it mean in a different cultural context? A lot of study in management control in that respect that emphasize the balance between the hard and the soft measure. Okay, And talking about self-measure, we need to take into account some of the cultural implication when you are trying to measure people's performance in a different cultural context. So in managing a cultural diversity, what Collinson says is that try to build diversity into recruitment, okay, location decision, as well as firm strategy. This needs to be aligned all together, right, and encourage cross-border discussion and communication, especially between managers that operating in different part of the world. If you can dissolve power to allow more autonomy and more insight emerge from local context, as one of you pointed that Dolce and Gabbana could do better with local partnership at the very beginning, and a local input in the development of their campaign altogether. So I'll just going to have a little bit question about the culture before we are moving about to the emerging market. Are we all clear about culture? Yeah. So if you are happy for me to proceed,